Thank you very much, Niels. Of course, I'm not going to be alone on this stage here. I'm really looking forward to the next conversation I'm going to have with Melanie Brinkmann and Alena Buyx. Melanie Brinkmann is virologist and president of the Virology Council for the German government. Both of the experts are doing a great effort in communicating science and current scientific results to the broader society and into the general public. And they're doing great work and had to deal with a lot of hate. We're talking about the responsibility of the science and also about the responsibility of the general public with regards to reading up on the results and paying attention. So a warm welcome to our experts, Alena Buyx and Melanie Brinkmann.
Wie schön, dass ihr beide hier seid.
Thank you for being here, both of you. It's great to have you. Hello. Welcome to the publica stage. Over the last few years, you have advised the governments, the general public. What changed in your view? How did basically the view of society on science change over the last few years? Obviously, there was good and bad. The general interest in science has increased by a lot, and also the faith the public puts into science, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and it stayed kind of stable, which I still find kind of amazing. Before the pandemic, more than 50% of the public answered that they don't trust in science, which really makes you wonder. And then it went up to 70% of people trust science, which was very positive, and we really like it. But on the other hand, we also have the phenomenon that there is a new form of science skepticism that is very loud, very aggressive, and definitely prone to act. And that is new, in my opinion. Even in your daily life, you can feel it when you communicate publicly. A lot of people here in the room will already have experienced it. And this is a bad news, obviously, but we really need to see how we can deal with that in the future. This is a very interesting certificate you mentioned. And Melanie, what is your view on this? How did the science communication change during the pandemic? The communication has changed completely. Suddenly, it affected everybody, and in the beginning, it was actually quite easy to communicate, but later on it became more and more difficult because it became more political, and this really put me in a bad spot. I was part of the headlines suddenly, which I found very uncomfortable, and I still feel a lot of thanks and gratefulness from people. It's not just the negativity and basically what I'm being invited to talk about all the hate I feel. And I'm usually starting off by saying it's not just that. There's also gratefulness, and it's important because we didn't always have good news, and we were communicating very honestly, and we got a lot of praise for that. But it changed quite a lot because the perception of science changed, in my eyes, quite a bit to the positive. And just like Alena said, we still do experience a lot of negativity, and as we just heard from Mr. Perksen, we need to think about how to be proactive about that. But yeah, so it's clear that it's not automatically going to be easy to get them together, the science communication and the science itself. So asking you, how are you going to deal with that in the future? Drosten, our virologist, for example, said when you do the communication, he basically doesn't have any time for his actual work, like trying to raise money for his research and stuff like that. And for you, it's probably even worse. I have always done a lot of research communication, and I actually quite enjoyed it. And I actively had to hide it in the past. For example, when I was trying to get tenure, and I was usually trying to communicate that, to hide my communication. When I was in Britain for a professorship, I did a lot of that, and I always had to hide that because it wasn't actually something that was viewed very favorably. This is something that was considered useless. I didn't get any impact points. I didn't get any funding. I couldn't pay any researcher with that. So the commissions that try to appoint the professors basically look very unfavorably on that, and we've been discussing this before. If we want people, now I basically have a public position where this is part of my role description, and my the president of my university is looking differently at it. But if we want outside of these certain restricted functions, we want scientists to communicate that. This takes a lot of time. It's a hard position to be in, to go out into the world and then put yourself in the spotlight and talk about this. We need to find ways within the scientific community to reward that in a way. We need to train people to do this. We need to put some focus on this and not just make it a downside on your CV. Melanie, how did you experience this and how did you deal with that? Definitely before the pandemic, there was very little gratefulness for this, or there was basically no coinage to be had, no reward for this. And there's a change of heart now that I see. I think it's actually it started before the pandemic, that if you were trying to raise funding, you could actually say that you were trying to do scientific communication in order to teach the general public about what I'm researching on, and you could get funding for that. But this is very new, this is very recent, and I've only done this once before, and I've now put my mind to not stop after the pandemic, but continue communicating your topics, but then actually distill them in a way that everybody can understand it. That you can, for example, teach in schools, that you can do it with the general public. And I think this is very important. I now have the funding for this. I didn't have them in the past. I remember the two of us being in a talk show, and she was saying, well, how do you actually do this? And I said, well, I'm just doing it. And she said, you don't have support? And I was saying, no, I don't even have a secretary. And she said, you're going to go to your president of your university and tell him that you need support. You need someone who takes your calls for you. And for me, this was a very eye-opening moment, and I actually did it. And it was actually given to me right away, but it wasn't given to me proactively. And this is what we need to change. The scientists that want it and that they will get the support that they need.
Can I say something about this? I really love to remember this. We had a really nice evening at that day. That's a really important point. We had a professional communicator on stage, and he does this scientifically, but we are not communication professionals. We have no idea at all. We don't know how to do this. And in the ethics committee, you get a basic media training. Yeah, that would have been my next question. That someone tells you, don't look directly at the camera, don't just talk too long, don't use simple and short sentences, and just ask yourself what do you want to convey. But that's sort of the basics. But universities don't offer media training, and I think we can become better in science. There's initiatives organizing that. For example, just having best practice examples, and how to do this Q&A, the absolute basics, to gather those for even also for younger scientists who are starting to communicate. And how do you do this? This is the next step. There's a similar structure in politics and in science. The first question is like, am I allowed to communicate? Am I allowed to go on social media and speak in the name of my institute if I'm not the media spokesperson? And how do we get these people to do this public work? And how do we get the media training and tell them how to communicate to different target audiences for different institutes? And they can, the idea that they can share this and learn from this, and what are the basics that you need to get from that? And yeah. No, it's not so easy. My big idol is Mighty Nguyen Kim, who is a German YouTuber, and I had to go to a podium, a debate about vaccinations, and I didn't have any experience, and wondered what to do, how to do this. And then I watched a video by Mighty and thought, wow, she does this so great. And if we find formats that can give us scientists ideas how to convey these things and work with images, for example, and when we talk, when we give talks, I'm doing my science and doing the graphics for my science, and I have to break them down to a different format, and I need support. And Mighty has a huge team behind her, but she says, I don't have I have enough space next to me. There can be more people doing this, and I really like that format for school classes and supporting teachers and give them materials and bring that to the children. And we have to start there. And yeah, you preempted that from what I wanted to say. This is a great point, to educate people and hand it over to others. In my team was asked for different things. In the last year, we did one workshop about the basics of public communication and media, where you hand on your own knowledge, and the other was the dealing with hate and disinformation and these kind of things. And we invited someone who told us to do this, and you can do this in your own house. You can try to get this into the schools and teaching. And more important, almost more important, if you think about the negative sides, yet you catch it before the people come to university. And Bergson said this, when the narratives have already formed and hit the people, then it's almost too late. And this is almost too late for these things to create an understanding of science communication skills when someone starts doing their PhD. So school would be a really good starting point. I have a very simple example for this. My son is 7th class, and he is great, and he is they got to know the French and Latin and Spanish teachers, and they asked themselves, what class do I want to learn? And this boy decided himself for Latin because the teacher was able to communicate well, and he said, well, I don't have this great teacher anymore. Now the grade is bad. He's getting bad grades, and this is what I'm learning now. A lot of politicians are lawyers and or understood politics, and scientists are the minority. And it's very important to take this fear from physics, chemistry, maths, and teach it better. Get the students. How often did I have the problem of explaining the thing with the exponential growth, and used, try to find examples that is, and found examples with the football stadium that is full and that is the football stadium is full on day 42 after, when one drop comes into the stadium and doubles every day. And this is super important, which I couldn't do as a scientist at all. It was communicating with politicians. I had to learn a lot about this, and it would be good that the scientists are the generation behind us find to be this easier. And you have to use these different kinds of logics and in this system. And I don't know how it is with you, but with us and the congresses, the talks are half an hour long, and the classical explanation, the classic statement by the ethics committee is 180 pages, and it's really well made, and there's a huge amount of footnotes, but no politician is going to read this. And for the politicians, you need the executive summary of maximally 3 pages, and the logics of these things. It's not bad, it's different. They have a different kind of input, and you have to get over the core of the things, and when you do science, you have to find the formats that work better in politics, and that means shorten complex topics that without losing complexity. And to say this, there's a call to action. We are talking a lot about the sustainability community, the politics community, communication politics community, and there's a lot of questions about how to communicate better together. We need more exchange, and
basically we could advise research institutions how they could teach their staff better. Now, if you have questions, if you tweet at me at Geraldine, then I'm going to look at my phone and try to incorporate them. So you've already been talking about the topic of hate in the media, and I want to get back to that, how you deal with the research skepticism. We basically have an important topic where half of the people are saying they're skeptics on what the research says. She was objecting that it's not 50% anymore. So how did you deal with that? How do you see the dynamic between the platform logic that we're talking about a lot and the political finding of an opinion and abuse of those systems? I'm going to start. This is a big topic, Personally, I'm an example. I demonstrate the silencing effect. I have a public position. Via my position, it's not really a job. It's basically an honorary position. I still have my main job of being a professor, but I represent the Ethics Commission, the Federal Ethics Commission, to the general public, and that's why I've been in all those talk shows, been talking to the media and stuff like that. I've done a lot, you as well, and I saw a lot of bad things. I also, just like Melanie said, I saw a lot of positive things, but also a lot of disheartening things that made me afraid. And that really ruins your day. If you ever had a really bad shitstorm, that's definitely not something that raises your mood. It really touches you deep inside. And what I found is that I've done this a long time. To this day, pretty much exactly 2 years ago, it was the first COVID point of view that we published. I basically quit. I forgot about Twitter. I canceled I canceled all the invitations to talk shows and all those things. And what happens then is that the voice stopped. This is the silencing effect. The hate and this very personal attack that I felt. It's basically the intended effect of those kind of attacks that I see, to stop you from saying, and I'm now trying to catch my breath because I still have to do this position for the next 2 years. And now that basically the circus has moved on to other topics, I can now do my job again and it's going to be a little more quiet. But we need to be very clear on the effect this has, the way that it silences people, that they stop talking. And I think this is a real danger that we need to get ahead of. We need to fire on all fronts. We need to go onto the platforms. They're all very polarizing. The more extreme the views, the more people click, and it basically leads you down a rabbit hole. The more hardcore it is, the deeper you go, the more extreme the views are that you're going to be presented with. Some people have very good ideas how to get ahead of that, some of it regulatory, some other. And my view is that we actually need to enforce the laws we already have. We would have laws on the book that would help here, but they're not being enforced right now. And one last sentence that I want to say, it's very important to me that it's very relevant for all of you. One of the most effective things that you can do in the social media to stop those waves of disinformation and those conspiracy theories, you need a sizable number of people who take action. There's an empiric results that prove that this can happen. Everybody who uses those platforms are basically have the responsibility to not propagate this kind of disinformation, to work against it, to talk and speak out against it. And don't just point your finger at the politicians, at the platforms, at the researchers. It means that we all have our responsibility here to take part in this fight. And I want to use this very old-fashioned word of the civil courage that we need to implement and that we need to there are so many examples. I'm pretty sure that you've all heard the podcast by Mr. Lobo that was about the climate change denier. He on that topic, he felt that the degree of aggression went up and up and up. It used to be just hate, but now he's at death threats, and there's a question of how to get down the level of hate. This is something you can learn from Mr. Kazin, who talked earlier about answering to these hate mails. The problem is, how do you do this? If there's 10,000 of these you get every day, how are you going to do this? And you can't be left alone with this. And this is why we need the solidarity of everyone. And I also want to still hear from you, Melanie, how you perceived this problem and how you felt about it. To be honest, I can't put this any better than Alena already put it. This would have been a nice sentence to end on, but it really, I feel touched by it, and it was the same for me. I basically withdrew from Twitter. I only do the bare necessities there, but I find it really admirable that there are people who defend me there. There was a time where I could basically say, oh, it's a nice day outside, and I would have had a shitstorm. But there were already voices that immediately went ahead and fought back against those detractors. And it's just like you said, they basically go out of their cover and really put themselves out there to defend me. And still, I'm withdrawing now because I have those phases where I need to chill out and take a breath, and where I'm asking myself why I'm putting myself through this. But then after a while, I can continue and I can do it again. But I already know now it's summer, it's easier, the pandemic is lower key, but in autumn and in winter, it's going to go up again. And we already know that the wave is going to hit us again, especially us as people. And I want to support with communication. And there are also other people who want to help out with communicating them. But it would be sad if all those voices were to disappear. And this is something we shouldn't allow to happen.
Ich möchte zwei Punkte fragen in einer zusammenfassen. Die eine geht auch darum, was soll
I have two questions here that I want to combine into one. So,
einmal von Jakob Bornholz.
One of them is from Jakob Bornholz and the other one is from Schmierfink. They're asking, what tips do you have for budding research scientists that the other question is, how do you teach the research scientists, the new ones, and how can you take the fear of the institutions and just encourage them to delegate more, to really empower them to take this communicational role? So Melanie already said this important thing, that it's already reached the science funding level. So it's definitely something that is higher on the agenda and that is being rewarded. And my tip is, do something in that regard, but don't do it too much. It's a little bit of a truism, but it's still true that science has first and foremost still to do more research. So unless you directly go into research communication, and this is your main forte, if you're in research still, then researching is still your main job. But it's a bonus, basically, to help out your own science discipline, where you can reach people, where you can communicate, that may help you out getting a new job or land a very interesting talk that you can give. It can help you, and I would really think about what you want to do. There's definitely a lot of material out there that you can use to improve your communicational skills for the research topics. My own university, for example, does trainings for new research scientists. There are a lot more resources out there, and I really encourage you to use all of them and proactively seek that out. Do we need different, structural support? Do we make it part of, for example, funding rounds, that if you put out a proposal for a research topic, that communication should be part of that? Those structures already exist, but usually within more like a federated structure where you have a big topic that is being researched on by multiple groups and universities. For example, in leukemics, I saw that, or in leukemia. But I also don't believe that every single researcher should be forced into that role. That is already too much again. But there are a lot of new research scientists, and they're saying, yeah, this was horrible what happened to Mr. Drosten. And I'm answering them, yeah, sure, but that was pretty extreme. This is not something that should dishearten you. It's not something that you should do, that you communicate when a pandemic is, for example, happening. It's not like we did that as our main job. We also need to communicate with other researchers and read all that, and before you talk to society at large. And it was a full-time job, and as Mr. Drosten said, for your research career, that is very difficult. But definitely, it's not something you should do during an pandemic. There's also other times where you can do that. So, do you have any ideas or wishes about how transdisciplinarity can help you? If there can be a joint action, for example, with the social sciences or arts, is there something you would wish for? Yes, all of that, and very concretely, I'm actually working on that already, a kind of task force on the topic. From the grounds up, from scientists, we are trying to collect best practices, tips, and how to talk to society, how to politics, because we're very dependent on being valued in that role. And that we need to really make it clear that this is a very important role that we take for democracy at large, for our society, and that it's catastrophic if science is not trusted anymore. This is very dangerous for our institution. It's very dangerous for democracy. That's why we need to fight against this. I thank you very much for this very interesting closing statement, and a warm applause for Alena and Melanie. Thank you.